Emma Collins pressed her hand against the jagged bark of a towering pine, her breath shallow and ragged. The cold mountain air bit at the thin jacket she wore, but it was the exhaustion settling deep into her bones that weighed heaviest. 7 months pregnant and alone, she had ventured into this remote mountain range seeking nothing more than a moment's reprieve, a fragile sanctuary away from the chaos she'd fled. But now, as twilight spilled over the rugged landscape, she realized she was hopelessly lost. Her footsteps, once steady and purposeful, had become erratic, stumbling over roots and loose stones as the dense forest closed in around her. The path she'd followed had vanished hours ago, swallowed by thick underbrush and shadows that lengthened with the setting sun. The distant howl of a lone coyote echoed through the silence, only deepening her vulnerability. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Emma's mind raced, tracing back to the day she had made the desperate decision to leave. Just weeks earlier, her life had unraveled like a thread pulled too tight. Her estranged partner's voice still haunted her. The sharp accusations, the veiled threats that left her no choice but to run. She had packed a small bag, tucked a few essentials inside, and slipped away under the cover of dawn, hoping the mountains would offer refuge. But the wilderness was a harsh guardian, indifferent to her plight. Her phone's battery had died hours ago, cutting off any hope of calling for help. The only sounds were her own labored breathing and the restless rustling of leaves overhead. The pregnancy, once a source of cautious hope, now felt like an unbearable burden amid the unforgiving terrain. Emma paused to rest against a rock, her hand instinctively cradling the gentle curve of her belly. The baby's fluttering movements were a bittersweet reminder of life persisting against all odds. She closed her eyes, willing herself to calm the rising tide of panic. "You're stronger than this," she whispered, though the words felt hollow. The forest seemed endless, a maze of towering evergreens and tangled undergrowth stretching as far as she could see. The fading light cast eerie shadows that danced among the trees, and the chill in the air deepened. A sudden gust stirred the branches above, sending a cascade of pine needles fluttering like green snow. Emma shivered, wrapping her arms tighter around herself. As the last light slipped beyond the horizon, she knew she needed shelter before nightfall. The thought sent her moving again, each step more deliberate despite the weariness pressing down. Her eyes scanned the darkness, searching desperately for any sign of refuge. A fallen tree, a cave, or even a shallow hollow to shield her from the biting cold. Just as despair began to settle in, a faint glimmer caught her eye, a silhouette against the backdrop of trees. Pushing through the underbrush, Emma's heart quickened as the outline of a cabin emerged, nestled in a small clearing. Its weathered logs and sloping roof bore the marks of time. Yet somehow it stood resilient, a quiet sentinel amid the wilderness. She approached cautiously, the gravel crunching beneath her boots. The cabin's windows were dark, and the door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. Hope flickered within her as she stepped across the threshold, the scent of aged wood and earth filling her senses. Inside, dust motes drifted in the fading light, and the remnants of a long abandoned hearth hinted at warmth once kindled here. Emma sank to the floor, relief washing over her in waves. The cabin might be old and forgotten, but it was shelter. For the first time since her flight began, she allowed herself a moment to breathe without the sharp edge of fear. The walls seemed to close around her, not with menace, but with a quiet promise of protection. As she settled in, Emma's thoughts drifted to the journey that had brought her here. The mountains, wild and untamed, had always held a distant allure, a place to escape the noise of the world. Now, they were her refuge, a last stand against the chaos that threatened to consume her. The baby stirred again, a gentle reminder of the life she carried and the future she still hoped to claim. Outside, the forest whispered in the growing darkness. But inside the cabin, Emma felt a fragile thread of hope begin to weave itself through the shadows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, she was no longer lost. The first light of dawn filtered tentatively through the cabin's single dusty window, casting pale stripes across the worn wooden floor. Emma stirred slowly, her body aching from the night spent on the cold, uneven boards. Yet, beneath the weariness, a quiet determination had taken root. The cabin, though battered and silent, offered a fragile promise of safety. She was no longer stranded in the merciless wilderness, at least not entirely. Rising carefully to her feet, Emma surveyed the small space. The cabin was modest, its walls constructed from time-worn logs, chinked with cracked mortar that had long since faded. A simple hearth dominated one wall, its blackened stones stained with soot from fires long extinguished. Near the hearth, a rickety wooden table held a scattering of broken plates and a rusted tin cup. A faded quilt lay folded on a narrow cot, its threadbare fabric whispering stories of nights much colder than this one. Despite the cabin's abandonment, the air inside carried a faint trace of warmth, as if the walls still remembered comfort. Emma's fingers brushed over the rough surface of the table, tracing the grain with a mix of reverence and longing. This place, forgotten by the world, now held the weight of her fragile hope. With careful steps, she explored the small room, her eyes adjusting to the soft morning light. Along one wall, a set of shelves sagged under the weight of dusty jars and tins, their labels faded beyond recognition. A chipped enamel basin sat nearby, stained and cracked, but still serviceable. Emma's fingers lingered on a faded photograph pinned to the wall. A family, years past, smiling beneath the same mountain shadows. She picked up the photograph, studying the faces with a sense of quiet curiosity. A man with a broad smile, a woman whose eyes seemed to hold secrets, and two children whose laughter seemed to echo through the years. Who had lived here? What stories had these walls witnessed? The question stirred something deep within her, a connection she couldn't yet name. Emma's gaze fell on the window, where the forest stretched endlessly beyond. The trees swayed gently in the morning breeze, their branches casting dappled patterns of light and shadow. Outside, the wilderness seemed both beautiful and daunting, a world where she was still a stranger. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly, feeling the subtle flutter of life within. The child growing inside her was a beacon in the dark, a symbol of resilience amid uncertainty. She had fled to these mountains seeking escape, but now she wondered if this place might hold something more, a chance to rebuild, to find strength where she had thought there was none. The cabin's door creaked as a sudden gust swept through the clearing, rattling loose boards and stirring dust from forgotten corners. Emma moved quickly to close it, securing the latch with a satisfying click. The outside world was still wild and unpredictable, but inside these walls, she had carved out a small sanctuary. Her thoughts drifted back to the path that had led her here, lost and desperate, stumbling through the forest until she found this refuge. The memory of her trembling hands and aching feet brought a shiver, but also a sense of triumph. She had survived the night, and now dawn had brought new possibilities. Emma knelt by the hearth, gathering a handful of dry twigs and brittle leaves she had spotted during a brief exploration of the cabin's small porch. With trembling fingers, she struck a spark against a stone, coaxing a flicker of flame to life. The fire caught quickly, sending a warm glow that pushed back the lingering chill. The crackling embers filled the room with a sense of life, breaking the oppressive silence that had clung to the cabin. Settling by the fire, Emma pulled the faded quilt around her shoulders. The warmth seeped into her tired muscles, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe deeply without the sharp edge of fear. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small tin of dry crackers and a flask of water. Meager sustenance, but enough to steady her. As she ate, her eyes wandered once more to the photograph on the wall. The faces seemed to watch over her, silent witnesses to the past. Emma wondered what had become of the family, whether they had left by choice or circumstance. The cabin's stillness suggested abandonment, but its endurance spoke of resilience. Her exploration continued as she opened a rickety cupboard, revealing a handful of old books and journals, their covers cracked and pages yellowed. One journal, bound in worn leather, caught her eye. She opened it carefully, the spine creaking softly as she turned the pages. The handwriting was elegant, curling across the paper in flowing script. Notes about the seasons, the wildlife, and the mountain's changing moods. Emma felt a flicker of kinship with the unknown author, a fellow soul who had sought solace and meaning in this remote place. She tucked the journal under her arm, a small treasure amid the cabin's forgotten remnants. The hours passed quietly, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Emma's body urged her to rest, but her mind buzzed with a restless energy. This cabin, once a mere shelter from the night, was beginning to feel like a refuge, a place where she could gather strength, piece by fragile piece. Her thoughts turned to the road ahead. She knew the mountains held dangers as well as beauty, wild animals, treacherous terrain, and the ever-present threat of isolation. Yet, beneath the weight of uncertainty, a spark of hope glimmered. Here, in this forgotten cabin, she could find a foothold, a moment of peace amid the storm. As the sun climbed higher, bathing the cabin in golden light, Emma stood by the window and looked out at the vast wilderness beyond. The trees whispered ancient secrets in the breeze, and the mountains rose in silent majesty. Somewhere in that vast expanse lay the path she must find, but for now, she would rest. She would gather her strength and learn the rhythms of this place. The cabin, though weathered and worn, had become a beacon, a symbol that even in the most unforgiving places, sanctuary could be found. Emma wrapped the quilt tighter around her shoulders, feeling the steady thump of her child within, and allowed herself a small, tentative smile. The journey was far from over, but the first step had been taken. The days that followed settled into a cautious rhythm, each one marked by the creaking of the cabin and the soft sounds of the forest just beyond its walls. Emma found herself drawn deeper into the small refuge, learning its contours and secrets with a careful curiosity that soothed the ache of uncertainty gnawing at her heart. The cabin, once a mere shelter from the night, was beginning to feel like a fragile sanctuary, an anchor amid the wild. Each morning, the light would spill through the window, dust motes dancing in the golden beams as Emma slowly rose from the cot. Her body, swollen with the weight of her pregnancy, protested the effort. But the promise of a new day pressed her forward. She moved quietly, mindful of the life growing within her, and tended to the small tasks that made the cabin habitable. She swept the floor with a worn broom she'd found tucked behind the door, chasing away the layers of dust that had settled like a shroud. The fire in the hearth was coaxed to life each morning, its warmth a balm against the lingering chill that clung to the mountain air. Emma scattered a handful of pine needles around the hearth, their sharp scent mingling with the smoke and filling the cabin with a strangely comforting aroma. As she worked, Emma's gaze often lingered on the walls, weathered timber etched with the marks of time. Her fingers traced the rough carvings, worn smooth in places, and she noticed strange symbols hidden among the grain. Angular lines and curved shapes, some faint, others deeply gouged, caught her attention. They were unlike anything she'd seen before, mysterious and cryptic, as if the cabin itself held secrets waiting to be uncovered. One afternoon, while exploring a small alcove near the hearth, Emma found an old photograph tucked behind a loose plank. The image was faded, but the faces were clear. A family, posed beneath the towering evergreens. A man with kind eyes, a woman whose smile was both warm and wistful, and two children whose laughter seemed to echo across the decades. The photograph was cracked and stained, edges curled with age, but it spoke of a life once lived here, of memories entwined with the very bones of the cabin. Emma sat on the floor, cradling the photograph in her hands as the baby inside stirred. The connection was palpable, as if the echoes of the past reached out to her, weaving her own story into the tapestry of this place. Who had they been? Why had they left? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, yet compelling. Her exploration led her next to a heavy chest tucked beneath the window, its surface scarred, but the iron clasps still sturdy. With a grunt, Emma pried open the lid, revealing a trove of letters and worn documents, their edges yellowed and brittle. The scent of aged paper rose in a faint mustiness, mingling with the cedar of the cabin. She unfolded the letters carefully, eyes tracing the flowing script penned decades ago. They spoke of mountain life, harvests, harsh winters, and the unyielding beauty of the land. But beneath the surface, a secret shimmered. One letter hinted at a discovery, a truth buried deep within the mountain's heart that could change everything the locals believed. Emma's pulse quickened as she read, the weight of the words settling into her like a whispered promise. The cabin was more than shelter. It was a keeper of stories, a guardian of mysteries long forgotten. She felt the stirrings of purpose, a thread pulling her deeper into the cabin's history and the mountain's silent watch. That night, the cabin seemed to breathe around her, shadows shifting with the flicker of candlelight. Emma lay awake, the baby's gentle kicks a steady rhythm beneath her hand. The symbols she'd found carved into the walls danced in her mind, their meaning just out of reach. The letters whispered in her thoughts, secrets waiting to be unveiled. Outside, the forest murmured softly, the rustle of leaves and distant calls weaving a lullaby. Emma closed her eyes, letting the cabin's quiet strength seep into her bones. Here, in this forgotten place, she was no longer just a woman running from her past. She was a seeker, a protector, and a bearer of a story yet to be told. As dawn approached, Emma sat by the hearth, the journal she'd found resting open on her lap. The delicate script invited her to write her own words, to add her voice to the chorus of those who had come before. With a tentative hand, she began to record her journey. The desperation, the hope, and the fragile beginnings of a new chapter. The cabin held its secrets close, but Emma was determined to unravel them, one carved symbol and faded letter at a time. The walls, once silent witnesses, were beginning to speak, and she was listening. The sun had barely risen when Emma's fingers traced the worn leather cover of the journal she had found. Its pages yellowed and delicate beneath her touch. She sat near the hearth, the faint warmth from the dying embers mingling with the crisp morning air that slipped through the cracked window. The cabin, quiet and still, held its breath as she delved deeper into the past, piecing together fragments of a story long hidden beneath layers of dust and time. Her eyes scanned the faded script, each word a thread weaving a tapestry of memory and loss. The journal belonged to a woman named Lillian, whose handwriting danced across the pages with a grace that belied the hardships she described. Lillian wrote of the mountains, their beauty, their cruelty, and the secrets they guarded fiercely. But as Emma read on, the tone shifted, hinting at a mystery lurking beneath the surface of everyday life. One entry, dated nearly 50 years ago, spoke of a discovery deep within the forest, a cavern hidden behind a veil of ancient pines where the earth whispered secrets in shadows. Lillian's words were cautious, tinged with awe and fear. She wrote of a strange light that glowed in the darkness, of symbols carved into stone walls that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Emma's breath caught as she read the passage again, the weight of the words settling heavily in her chest. This was no ordinary place, no mere cabin forgotten by time. It was a gateway to something deeper, a secret that had shaped the lives of those who had called this mountain home. Driven by a growing sense of purpose, Emma rose and moved toward the small alcove where she had discovered the chest of letters. She sifted through the fragile papers, her fingers trembling as she found a map tucked between the folds. The ink was faded, but the lines sketched a path through the dense forest, marking a spot deep within the mountain, an X pressed firmly on the page. Her heart pounded as she studied the map, the realization dawning that Lillian had charted a course to the very source of the mountain's mystery. What had she found there? And why had she never returned to speak of it? Emma folded the map carefully and tucked it into her jacket, the weight of it both thrilling and daunting. The baby within her stirred, a soft reminder of the life she carried and the future she hoped to protect. She knew that following this path would be dangerous, but the pull of the unknown was irresistible. As the days passed, Emma prepared herself for the journey ahead. She gathered what little supplies the cabin offered, a rusted knife, a coil of rope, and a sturdy lantern with a flickering flame. The forest outside beckoned, its shadows deepening with the promise of discovery and peril. Before setting out, Emma returned to the journal, seeking guidance in Lillian's words. The entries spoke of caution, of respect for the mountain's secrets, and of the need to listen to the wind, the trees, and the silent language of the earth itself. Emma folded the journal close, a talisman against the uncertainty that lay before her. Stepping outside, the crisp morning air filled her lungs, sharp and invigorating. The forest stretched endlessly, a maze of towering pines and tangled undergrowth that seemed to pulse with life. Emma's footsteps were light as she followed the map's directions, moving deeper into the wilderness with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. The path was narrow and overgrown, the underbrush clutching at her boots as she pressed forward. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in fractured beams, illuminating patches of moss and wildflowers that carpeted the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, a heady perfume that grounded her in the present, even as her mind raced with questions. After hours of careful navigation, Emma reached a clearing where the trees opened to reveal a sheer rock face, its surface scarred by time and weather. At its base, hidden beneath a curtain of vines, was the entrance to a cavern, dark and yawning, inviting and forbidding all at once. Her pulse quickened as she approached, the weight of the moment settling over her like a shroud. The air shifted, cooler and stiller here, carrying whispers that seemed to rise from the depths. Emma's fingers brushed aside the vines, revealing the rough stone etched with symbols that matched those carved into the cabin's walls. With a deep breath, she stepped inside, the beam of her lantern cutting through the darkness. The cavern's walls closed around her, ancient and unyielding, alive with the echoes of the past. As she ventured deeper, the glow Lillian had described began to shimmer ahead, a pale, ethereal light that bathed the stone in a surreal luminescence. Emma's eyes widened as she took in the sight. Walls adorned with intricate carvings, symbols woven into patterns that seemed to shift and pulse. The air hummed with an energy that was both unsettling and mesmerizing. She reached out, fingers trembling, to touch the cool stone, feeling a current of power ripple beneath her skin. A sudden noise, a faint whisper, or perhaps the settling of stone, made her start, heart hammering in her chest. She pressed onward, drawn forward by a force she could neither explain nor resist. The cavern held its secrets tightly, but Emma was determined to uncover them. Emerging into a small chamber, she found a weathered journal resting on a stone pedestal, its pages open as if waiting for her arrival. The script inside was unfamiliar, but the symbols mirrored those she had seen throughout the cabin and the cavern walls. Emma's fingers traced the markings, a sense of connection blooming within her. The discovery was a revelation, a link between past and present, a story whispered across generations. Emma knew that this secret was more than a curiosity. It was a truth that could reshape everything she understood about this place, about herself, and about the life growing inside her. As she carefully gathered the journal and prepared to leave the cavern, the mountain seemed to exhale, the weight of its hidden history settling softly around her. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Emma felt a quiet strength rising within, a determination to protect the legacy she had uncovered and the fragile hope it represented. The cavern's cool shadows clung to Emma as she stepped back into the forest's embrace, the journal cradled carefully in her arms. Daylight filtered through the towering pines, dappling the forest floor in shifting patterns of gold and green. Yet beneath the beauty, a subtle shift rippled through the air, a warmth that seemed both unnatural and reassuring. It was as if the mountain itself breathed, alive with secrets and watchful presence. That evening, as Emma settled by the hearth in the cabin, the atmosphere thickened with an unspoken energy. The fire flickered erratically, casting elongated shadows that danced along the walls. She traced the carved symbols again, their meaning still elusive but undeniably potent. A low hum vibrated beneath her skin, a pulse that matched the steady thump of the baby within her. As darkness deepened, soft whispers tickled the edges of her hearing, a murmuring carried on the wind or perhaps woven into the cabin's very timbers. Emma sat still, heart pounding, eyes wide as fleeting shapes flickered in the corners of the room. The cabin, once silent and still, now felt alive, its presence wrapping around her like a protective cloak. Sleep was elusive. When it finally claimed her, dreams seized her in vivid waves. She found herself wandering the forest, bathed in silver moonlight, the trees towering like ancient sentinels. Faces emerged from the shadows, ghostly figures whose eyes held a blend of sorrow and warning. They spoke without words. Their messages carried in emotions and images rather than sound. In one dream, a woman with fierce eyes beckoned Emma forward, guiding her to a clearing where a storm raged. Lightning crackled, illuminating the twisted branches and jagged rocks. The storm's fury was both terrifying and cleansing, a force that both destroyed and renewed. Emma reached out, feeling the raw energy course through her veins. She awoke with a start, the echo of thunder rolling distant in the night. The cabin was silent once more, but the sense of the mountain's power lingered. Over the coming days, subtle signs reinforced the connection she sensed. The temperature in the cabin shifted suddenly, warmth rising inexplicably on cold mornings. Shadows lengthened and twisted, forming patterns that mirrored the carvings. The forest seemed to respond to her presence, the rustle of leaves and the call of animals synchronized with her movements. Emma's own body reflected the cabin's mysterious pulse. The baby inside stirred more frequently, kicks growing stronger, as if attuned to the unseen rhythms surrounding them. Her dreams remained vivid, each night revealing fragments of the mountain's story, a tale woven of ancient rites, protection, and sacrifice. One afternoon, while exploring a small nook beneath the cabin's floorboards, Emma discovered a wooden box hidden beneath loose planks. Inside lay a delicate bell, its surface etched with symbols matching those she had seen throughout the cabin and cavern. The bell was surprisingly light, its chime clear and pure when rung. Curious, Emma lifted the bell and gave it a gentle shake. The sound resonated through the cabin, lingering in the air like a summons. Almost immediately, the temperature shifted, and a soft glow emanated from the hearth. It was as though the cabin itself had awakened in response, acknowledging her presence and her claim. Days later, a visitor arrived, a man moving quietly through the forest toward the cabin. Emma spotted him from the window, his approach cautious but purposeful. He introduced himself as Lucas, a local woodsman familiar with the mountain's history and its shadows. His eyes held a wary respect as he looked upon the cabin and then at Emma. Lucas spoke of the cabin's dark past, of disappearances and tragedies that had haunted the area for generations. He warned her of the dangers the mountain attracted, the restless spirits drawn by its mysteries. Yet, beneath his caution was an understanding, a recognition of the cabin's protective nature and Emma's unique bond with it. "You're not the first to find this place," he said quietly. "But few stay. The mountain tests you, Emma. It watches, and it chooses who it will protect." Emma listened, absorbing his words with a mixture of fear and hope. She shared her discoveries, the journal, the cavern, the bell, and Lucas nodded, confirming the legends she had begun to unravel. Together, they spoke of the mountain's power, its ancient guardians, and the delicate balance between danger and sanctuary. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's resolve deepened. The cabin's presence was no longer a mystery, but a force, a living entity intertwined with her own fate and that of the child she carried. The whispers and visions, the sudden warmth and protective glow, all spoke of a legacy she was only beginning to understand. The mountain's ancient energy seemed to shield her, warding off unseen threats and soothing her fears. Emma embraced the cabin as more than shelter. It was a sanctuary imbued with a power that transcended the physical. The forest outside remained wild and unpredictable, but within these walls, a sacred bond had formed. One evening, as a storm gathered beyond the peaks, Emma sat by the hearth, the bell resting on her lap. The wind howled, rattling the cabin's timbers, and the fire's flames danced wildly. The baby stirred, and Emma felt a surge of strength and clarity wash over her. She rang the bell once, its clear chime cutting through the storm's roar. The cabin responded instantly. The fire steadied, the shadows softened, and an overwhelming sense of peace descended. In that moment, Emma understood the cabin's true nature: a guardian, a protector, and a beacon for those chosen to carry its legacy forward. The storm passed, leaving a sky painted with stars and the promise of dawn. Emma smiled softly, the weight of fear lifting like morning mist. The cabin's secrets were still unfolding, its power still growing, and she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. For herself, for the child, and for the mountain that had become their home. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth as Emma stepped outside the cabin. The forest around her stirred with life, birds calling, leaves rustling gently in the breeze. But beneath the familiar sounds lay an undercurrent of unease she couldn't shake. The storm from the night before had left the world washed clean, yet a shadow seemed to linger, darkening the edges of the day. Emma's thoughts were interrupted by the crunch of footsteps on fallen needles, and she turned to see a man approaching through the trees. His gait was steady but purposeful, eyes sharp beneath a weathered cap. As he drew closer, Emma recognized him. Lucas, the woodsman who had appeared days earlier, his presence both unsettling and oddly comforting. He stopped a few feet away, hands tucked into the pockets of his heavy coat, his gaze steady yet cautious. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, his voice low but firm. "Not with the baby coming." Emma's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? I'm safe here." Lucas shook his head, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "Safe is a relative term in these parts. The mountain's got a history, dark things that don't rest easy. This cabin, it's more than wood and stone. It carries a weight, draws attention. You need to be careful." The Nixasir warning hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Emma felt a chill that wasn't from the mountain breeze, a prickling at the back of her neck that spoke of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. "I've seen what the cabin can do," she replied, voice steady despite the unease. "I've felt its protection, but I know there's more here, things I don't understand yet." Lucas's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "That protection comes at a cost. The mountain tests those it chooses. There are forces here, old, restless. They don't take kindly to strangers, even those invited." He paused, scanning the trees as if expecting something to emerge from the undergrowth. "I've lost friends to this place. Good people who got caught in its pull and never came back. You need to think about what staying here means, for you and the child." Emma swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over her like a shadow. She had come seeking refuge, but now the mountain's ancient whispers felt less like comfort and more like a summons she couldn't ignore. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly, her gaze meeting his. Lucas sighed, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Because I've been where you are, and because I believe you might be the one the mountain's been waiting for. But that means you have to be ready. For the mountain, for the past, and for what's coming." Emma's fingers clenched the journal she carried, the worn leather familiar against her palm. The secrets she'd uncovered, the symbols carved into the cabin walls and cavern stones, all pointed to something greater than herself. Yet Lucas's warning brought a sobering clarity. This sanctuary was not without its dangers. As the day wore on, Lucas stayed nearby, sharing stories of the mountain's dark past, tales of disappearances, strange lights flickering in the night, and whispers carried on the wind. He spoke of those who had tried to claim the cabin's power, only to be consumed by it. His voice was tinged with sorrow and respect, a testament to the mountain's enigmatic hold. Emma listened intently, the pieces of the puzzle shifting in her mind. The cabin's protective aura, the visions she'd experienced, and the warnings now laid bare, all formed a complex tapestry of mystery and caution. That evening, as twilight deepened and the forest settled into silence, Lucas helped Emma reinforce the cabin's defenses. Together, they secured the windows with sturdy boards and cleared the surrounding brush, creating a buffer against the encroaching wilderness. The ritual felt both practical and symbolic, a stand against the unseen forces that lurked beyond the threshold. Before he left, Lucas placed a small charm in Emma's hand, a simple carved stone etched with ancient symbols. "For protection," he said solemnly. "Keep it close." Emma felt a surge of gratitude tempered by the gravity of his parting words. "I'll be careful," she promised, though uncertainty lingered beneath her resolve. As the night deepened, Emma sat by the hearth, the charm resting against her heart. The cabin's shadows flickered in the firelight, and the whispers returned, soft, elusive, yet unmistakably present. The mountain's legacy was entwined with her own now, a bond forged in mystery and shadow. She closed her eyes, listening to the rhythm of the forest and the steady beat of the baby within. The path ahead was fraught with unknowns, but Emma knew she could no longer turn away. The cabin's secrets called to her, demanding courage and vigilance. And so, beneath the watchful gaze of ancient trees and the endless sky, Emma prepared to face the mountain's tests. Her sanctuary and her trial intertwined, her fate unfolding with each breath and every heartbeat. The silence of the mountains was shattered one crisp morning by the distant drone of engines and the snap of camera shutters. Emma woke to the sound, a sudden and unwelcome intrusion cutting through the tranquil isolation she had come to cherish. Peering cautiously out the weathered window, she saw a small convoy of vehicles winding up the narrow forest road, reporters and curious onlookers spilling out with equipment and blinking lights. Her heart tightened in her chest. The world she had fled, the noise, the judgment, the relentless scrutiny, was closing in. The news of her disappearance had evidently spread, and now the story of a pregnant woman surviving alone in the wilderness was capturing public imagination. The cabin, once a secret haven, was now the epicenter of attention. Emma's mind raced as she watched the crowd gather. Cameras pointed at the rustic structure, microphones thrust forward, and reporters calling out questions she could not answer. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way the mountain shadows had never allowed. The cabin's protective aura seemed fragile against the glare of flashing lights and probing eyes. Lucas appeared beside her, his expression grim but steady. "They found you," he said quietly, his gaze sweeping the scene below. "Word travels fast. The media's hungry for a story, your story." Emma nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I wanted to stay hidden, to find peace." Lucas placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes the past catches up, no matter how far you run. But you're stronger than they know." As the reporters pressed closer, Emma stepped outside, her steps measured despite the turmoil within. The questions came in waves: how she had survived, what the cabin meant, and what she planned to do next. Cameras focused on her swelling belly, the symbol of new life amid the wilderness. She answered cautiously, revealing only what she chose to share. The cabin was her refuge, a place of healing and discovery. She spoke of the mountain's mysteries in vague terms, careful not to reveal too much to the eager crowd. Her voice was steady, though her heart beat wildly beneath the scrutiny. The media frenzy escalated quickly. News crews set up tents along the forest edge, and reporters broadcast live from the clearing. The story of the pregnant woman and the enigmatic cabin became a sensation. drawing interest from across the country. Social media buzzed with theories and speculation, turning Emma's private sanctuary into a public spectacle. Despite the chaos, the cabin seemed to respond in subtle ways. The symbols carved into the wood glowed faintly in the twilight, and a gentle warmth enveloped Emma whenever she returned inside. It was as if the mountain itself was shielding her from the storm of attention, a silent guardian amid the noise. Lucas remained a steady presence, navigating the shifting tides of media and curiosity. He helped Emma maintain boundaries, shielding her from invasive questions and guiding her through the relentless spotlight. Together, they crafted a narrative that honored the cabin's mystery without exposing its deeper secrets. Amid the frenzy, Emma found moments of quiet, early mornings when the crowd had not yet gathered, evenings when the forest reclaimed its stillness. In those fleeting hours, she returned to the journal and the carved symbols, grounding herself in the connection to the mountain's ancient legacy. The baby's movements grew stronger each day, a vivid reminder of the life at the center of this unfolding story. Emma's resolve deepened. She would protect her child and the cabin's secrets, no matter the cost. One afternoon, a local historian arrived, drawn by the media coverage and the whispers surrounding the cabin. She brought with her old records and maps, confirming fragments of the journal's tales and the legends Lucas had shared. Together, they pieced together a history of the mountain and its guardians, weaving Emma's story into a lineage of resilience and mystery. As headlines proclaimed her survival and the cabin's enigmatic role, Emma felt a shift within herself. The media frenzy, though overwhelming, was forging a new chapter, one where her story was not just of escape, but of strength, connection, and the enduring power of the mountain's watchful presence. Though the eyes of the world were upon her, Emma remained tethered to the cabin's quiet heartbeat. The wilderness around her was no longer just a backdrop, but a living, breathing force intertwined with her fate and the future she carried within. With the dawn of each new day, she embraced the delicate balance between exposure and sanctuary, knowing that the journey ahead would test her in ways she had yet to imagine. But for now, amid the flashing lights and probing questions, she stood firm. A woman transformed by the mountain's mysteries and the life blossoming within her. The morning light filtered softly through the cabin's single window, casting gentle patterns across the worn wooden floor. Emma sat by the hearth, the baby's steady kicks a comforting rhythm beneath her palm. Outside, the forest stirred quietly, a world untouched by the clamoring media and the relentless demands of the outside world. Within these walls, she had found a sanctuary, a place where strength blossomed in the face of uncertainty. The days since the media frenzy had settled into a tenuous balance. Reporters still came and went, their curiosity tempered by respect. But Emma's focus had shifted inward, toward the life growing within her and the cabin's mysterious embrace. The protective aura she felt was no longer a whisper, but a palpable presence, a shield woven from ancient energies and quiet resilience. Each morning, she rose with purpose, tending to the hearth and the small rituals she had come to rely on. The fire's warmth seeped into her bones, as if the cabin itself infused her with strength. She continued to explore the journal, its pages revealing layers of wisdom and connection that deepened her understanding of the mountain's legacy. Amid her solitude, Emma felt a transformation taking root, not just in her body, but in her spirit. The fear and uncertainty that had once shadowed her steps were giving way to a fierce determination. She was no longer simply surviving. She was reclaiming her power, embracing the role the cabin and the mountain had called her to. Lucas remained a steadfast presence, offering quiet support and sharing stories of the mountain's guardianship. Together, they prepared for the challenges ahead, fortifying the cabin and nurturing the fragile bond between past and present. His knowledge grounded her, a bridge to the history she was now part of. The cabin's protective nature became increasingly evident. On days when storms raged outside, the fire flickered but never died, and the walls seemed to hold back the howling wind. Emma felt an inexplicable calm during moments of uncertainty, as if the mountain's ancient spirit watched over her and her unborn child. One afternoon, while sitting by the window, Emma noticed a delicate pattern of light dancing across the floor. Shadows cast by the carved symbols etched into the cabin's beams. The patterns shifted subtly, their movements synchronized with the baby's gentle kicks. She reached out, tracing the carvings with her fingertips, feeling a surge of connection and reassurance. Her dreams grew vivid and purposeful, no longer fragmented whispers, but clear visions that guided her steps. She saw the mountain's history unfold, rituals of protection, sacrifices made to safeguard those chosen to carry the legacy, and the enduring strength of those who had come before. The cabin was more than shelter. It was a living testament to resilience and hope. Emma began to document her own experiences in the journal, adding her voice to the lineage of women who had dwelled within these walls. Her handwriting was tentative at first, then more confident as the pages filled with reflections, discoveries, and plans for the future. The act of writing grounded her, a tangible link between past and present. Despite the media attention, Emma found a growing circle of support among the locals, those who understood the mountain's mysteries and respected the sanctity of the cabin. They brought supplies, shared stories, and offered companionship without intrusion. This emerging community became a lifeline, bridging the gap between isolation and connection. As the weeks passed, Emma's strength flourished alongside her child's growth. The cabin's energy seemed to pulse in harmony with her own heartbeat, a symphony of life and legacy intertwined. She prepared for the inevitable arrival with a quiet confidence, gathering what she needed and arranging the space with care. The forest outside remained wild and unpredictable, but within the cabin, a sanctuary had been forged, a place where fear gave way to courage and solitude blossomed into belonging. Emma embraced her role as keeper of the mountain's secrets, protector of the legacy, and mother to the life soon to be born. One evening, as twilight deepened and the first stars appeared, Emma sat by the hearth, the journal open on her lap. The bell Lucas had given her rested nearby, its presence a steady reminder of the cabin's watchful spirit. She closed her eyes, breathing in the warmth and the quiet power that surrounded her. The journey was far from over, but Emma felt ready, strong, connected, and unyielding. The mountain had chosen her, and she had answered its call. With each breath, each heartbeat, she stepped deeper into her destiny. A woman transformed by the wild, mysterious sanctuary she now called home. The night had settled deep into the mountains, a velvet cloak pierced by the silver gleam of stars. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with anticipation, every creak and sigh of the old timbers echoing the rhythm of Emma's own steady breaths. The time was near. Her body, heavy and aching, bore the unmistakable signs of labor, each contraction a wave rolling through her with rising intensity. Lucas was by her side, calm and steady, his hands skilled from years spent tending to the wilderness and its hidden dangers. A midwife, drawn by the stories whispered through the mountain villages and the cabin's growing legend, had arrived at dusk. She moved quietly, her presence a balm of experience and reassurance amid the storm of pain and uncertainty. Emma's fingers gripped the worn quilt, heart pounding in sync with the labor's relentless cadence. The cabin seemed alive around her. The fire's glow warm and steady, the carved symbols on the walls casting shifting shadows that danced like silent guardians. Outside, the forest held its breath. The wind stilled as if in reverence. The midwife's voice was soft but firm, guiding Emma through each breath, each moment of surrender and strength. Lucas kept a watchful eye on the cabin's threshold, alert to any sign of the mountain's restless spirits. The air was thick with an energy both ancient and sacred, a sacred space where life and legacy intertwined. As the hours passed, the storm that had gathered earlier reached its crescendo, thunder rolling over the peaks and rain lashing against the cabin's weathered exterior. Yet inside, a profound calm prevailed, the cabin's protective aura shielding its fragile occupant from the tempest's fury. In the final moments, Emma felt a surge of power unlike any before. A fierce primal force drawing her deep into the lineage of women who had birthed life within these walls. With a cry that echoed through the mountain air, she brought her daughter into the world, a small, wailing bundle wrapped in the quilt that had witnessed generations. The midwife smiled, tears glistening in her eyes as she placed the newborn in Emma's arms. The baby's eyes opened briefly, reflecting the flickering firelight, a spark of recognition passing between mother and child. Emma named her Elela Nena, honoring the grandmother whose legacy had led her to this place. Outside, the storm began to abate, the wind softening to a gentle murmur and the rain tapering to a whisper. The mountain seemed to exhale, a sigh of relief and welcome that rippled through the trees. The cabin's walls glowed softly, the carvings illuminated by an otherworldly light that pulsed in time with a new life nestled in Emma's arms. In the days that followed, Emma embraced her role as mother and keeper of the legacy. The cabin provided for them both, kindling warmth, nourishing food growing in hidden patches nearby, and a sanctuary from the world beyond. The forest seemed to cradle them, its ancient spirits watching, protective and unseen. Lucas remained close, a steadfast guardian and friend, helping Emma navigate the delicate balance between the mundane and the mystical. The midwife's presence lingered for a time, sharing wisdom and rituals that bound mother and child to the mountain's enduring spirit. As Elela Nena grew, her presence brought a renewed vitality to the cabin. Her laughter echoed through the trees, a bright thread woven into the mountain's timeless tapestry. Emma documented their days in the journal, the pages filling with stories of survival, discovery, and the blossoming bond between mother, daughter, and land. The challenges were many. Harsh weather, the ever-present isolation, and the lingering shadows of the mountain's mysteries. Yet Emma faced each with a strength born of love and the deep connection to the cabin's protective power. Together, they forged a new chapter in the legacy of the Blackwood women, a story of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable ties that bind generations across time and place. The cabin stood as a beacon, a sanctuary where life and history intertwined, and where Emma and Elela Nena would continue the story begun long ago. In the quiet moments, as the fire crackled and the forest whispered outside, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From lost and alone to strong and connected, she had found not just a refuge, but a home. A place where the past and future met in the enduring embrace of the mountains. With her daughter nestled against her heart, Emma whispered a promise to the cabin and the legacy it held. Their story was just beginning, a living testament to the power of hope, heritage, and the wild, watchful forest that had sheltered them both. The first light of autumn filtered through the tall pines, casting a soft glow over the cabin and its quiet clearing. leaves, painted in hues of amber and crimson, drifted lazily to the forest floor, swirling in gentle eddies stirred by the crisp mountain breeze. Inside, Emma sat by the hearth, Elena nestled against her chest, the baby's soft breaths mingling with the crackle of the fire. The cabin had become more than a refuge. It was a home steeped in history and alive with the legacy of the women who had come before. Emma's journal lay open on the rough-hewn table, pages filled with stories of survival, discovery, and the deepening bond between mother and child. Each word was a testament to the journey that had transformed her. From a lost and frightened woman to the keeper of a powerful lineage. Outside, the forest whispered its timeless song. The rustle of leaves and the distant call of a hawk weaving a chorus that echoed through the mountains. Emma listened, feeling the rhythm of the land pulse beneath her skin, a steady heartbeat that matched her own. The days had settled into a peaceful cadence. Emma tended the cabin and the surrounding land, harvesting herbs and tending a small garden that bloomed with wildflowers and medicinal plants. Elena grew strong, her laughter ringing through the trees like a bright thread woven into the mountain's tapestry. Visitors came and went. Locals who respected the cabin's sanctity and shared stories of the mountain's secrets. Lucas remained a constant presence, his friendship a steady anchor amid the shifting seasons. Together, they honored the traditions and protections that had safeguarded the cabin for generations. Emma's reflection extended beyond the present moment, reaching back through time to the women whose strength and courage had paved the way. She felt their presence in the carved symbols etched into the cabin's walls, in the whispered wisdom carried on the wind, and in the very earth beneath her feet. There were challenges still, the harsh winters, the solitude, and the lingering shadows of the mountain's mysteries. But Emma faced them with a resilience born of love and connection. Each trial strengthened the bond between her daughter, and the land that sheltered them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with strokes of rose and gold, Emma sat on the porch with Elena cradled in her arms. The baby's eyes sparkled with curiosity and wonder, a reflection of the world unfolding before her. Emma whispered stories of the cabin's past, of the women who had called it home, and of the mountain's enduring spirit. She spoke of hope and legacy, of the strength found in roots and the courage to forge new paths. As darkness settled, the cabin's windows glowed warmly, a beacon in the encroaching night. The carved symbols shimmered softly, their light a silent promise of protection and guidance for the generations to come. Emma's heart swelled with a profound sense of purpose. The journey that had begun in fear and uncertainty had blossomed into a life rich with meaning and connection. The cabin was not just a shelter, but a living testament, a sanctuary where the past and future converged in the quiet strength of the mountains. With Elena sleeping peacefully against her, Emma felt the weight of her lineage settle gently upon her shoulders. She was the keeper of a legacy that transcended time, a guardian of stories written in wood and stone, whispered through leaves and carried on the wind. In that moment, beneath the vast expanse of stars, Emma breathed deeply, embracing the path she had chosen and the legacy she would pass on. The cabin, the mountain, and the women who had come before stood with her, an unbroken chain of strength and hope. Her pen moved steadily across the pages of the journal, marking the beginning of a new chapter. The story was far from over. It was only just beginning.